All right. Well, we still have more people joining, but it's 1:03, so we'll get started. Again, my name's Steve Cohn. I'm the founder of Validate Lead. Thanks for everyone for joining today. Dan's one of the smartest people I know, specifically around this topic of product and building great products and user research and setting up tests and experiments to validate. When people joke, what are you, a rocket scientist? Well, actually, he kind of is. So he started his career in the Navy, working on submarines and as a product manager on naval reactors and for submarines. So he's kind of wicked smart. Went to work at Intuit in product management, worked all the way there up to being a kind of a group product manager for Quicken. Intuit, for those who don't know already, is just a great kind of lean shop. They have a very lean approach to testing and validating. Eric Ries loves referencing Intuit and kind of their approach. They're big into user research and testing. So that's where he kind of honed his product management skills. Went on to run product at Friendster. So he can now talk about failure too. So that's always a good point in a product manager's. And then since then he's been he started a company as well, and is also now does consulting for some of the best companies that are growing really fast around this topic. He's written a book that's terrific. I highly recommend reading it, and actually not just you reading it, having your team read it, called the Lean Product Playbook. It's, as I talk to companies and I talk to designers and product managers and CEOs about this kind of concept of lean and running experiments, everyone's like, yeah, it sounds so good in theory, but I don't know how to actually do this in my with my company. How do I tactically do this stuff? And because all the books are like, they give case studies. Eric Ries' book is nice case studies, but it's like, okay, how do I translate that? Like, what do I specifically do? That's the problem that Lean Product Playbook solves, and they do it in a very elegant, very tactical way, in a way that lets you understand really what how you can do something today that is lean. You don't have to do everything. You can do it today and start doing pieces of it and moving in that direction. And I think that's what's great about the book. So Dan's brilliant. I'm a big fan. I think you're going to enjoy getting to know him and talking about his theories.
Well, Stephen, thanks so much for the kind introduction. I'll try to live up to it. Yeah, I'm here today to talk about how to innovate with prototypes and customer feedback, which is basically like the subtitle of my book. And I won't cover my background much more because Stephen kind of went into it. I just will share that I started out with a technical background and got an MBA, and have spent time studying and working on UX design as well, since that's adjacent to product management. And I have consulted for over 6 years now to various startups. I worked at Box in the early days. I've also consulted to Facebook and Microsoft. And I also run a meetup out here in Silicon Valley. In case any of the webinar attendees are out here in Silicon Valley, we have a great meetup with awesome speakers like Stephen Cohn from Validate Lead. And I like to cover, I like to give you a recipe book, a playbook in my talk. So I have to cover a lot of ground. It might feel a little fast, but I put my slides on SlideShare. So if you miss anything, you can definitely go refer to them later. And my Twitter handle is @Dan Olsen. I've been given this talk actually before Lean Startup was coined. That term was coined with some of the similar concepts. It was awesome that Eric Ries gave them a name and added to the existing ideas. And I used to ask who's heard of Lean Startup. Now it's like, who hasn't heard of it is what I ask. And if you just had to summarize at a high level, what's it all about? It's basically about articulating a hypotheses, getting clear about what are you assuming, figuring out the fastest way and cheapest way to test those, deliberately keeping your scope small. That's where the MVP concept comes in, which we'll talk about. Testing your hypotheses with customers, learning and iterating with the goal of achieving product market fit. And when you see these bullet points on a slide and somebody explains it like I just did, it sounds pretty easy, right? It sounds like an easy, oh yeah, I get it. You can nod your head. It's easy to nod your head and say, yeah, I get that. But what I've found in talking with entrepreneurs and product people and designers and developers at a lot of different companies is they read the Lean Startup. They're motivated. They get it. They want to do it. They understand these high-level concepts. But when they go to try to do it themselves, they just run into challenges and obstacles. And the best analogy I can think of is kind of like when January 1st rolls around and you decide you want to get in better shape and you say, you know what, I'm going to work out. And you buy some workout clothes and you join a gym and you show up at the gym, you're all excited. And then you get there and you're kind of like this guy. You have no idea what to do. It's not for lack of motivation. It's not for understanding that you need to work out. You just literally don't know the details of what should I be doing. Maybe you're like this guy, kind of winging it, making stuff up, trying to make things up as you go. Or maybe you're like this guy and just feeling completely overwhelmed. So that, as Stephen said, that's what led me to write the Lean Product Playbook, is to basically capture these kind of product management principles I've been using in my career. And if you want to apply Lean Startup principles, walking you through it step by step. And that's what I'm going to cover in my talk today. And I just want to offer, if you guys want to try to win a signed copy of the book, please tweet about this talk during the talk. Just include my hashtag my handle at Dan Olsen. A lot of times if there's a slide you like, sometimes people take a screenshot and they'll include that in their tweet. Please include some hashtags so other people can see it, like Lean Startup or UX or Product Management. And then this link at the bottom, tiny.cc/LPP for Lean Product Playbook, that goes to the book page. So like I said, tweet about it and I'll send a signed copy to one of the people that tweets. So the interesting thing is there is a lot of buzz about Lean Startup, and there are a lot of terms floating around or flying around. And one of them is product market fit. The interesting thing is it was actually coined by Mark Andreessen in 2007, but I haven't seen a really, really good definition of it. And so when I went to write my book and give people a prescriptive way to achieve product market fit, I realized, I need a definition. I need a working model that we can use to approach it. And so I want to share this, what I call the product market fit pyramid. It consists of 5 layers that build on top of each other. At the bottom, we have the market, and it all starts with your target customer. Basically, whose problem is this intended to solve? And the next layer above that is what are their underserved needs? And these 2 layers go hand in hand. If you change the customer you're talking about, then the needs that they have will change. And specifically, I focus on underserved needs, which I'll talk about in a minute, which are the needs that aren't being met well enough today with existing solutions. The top part of the pyramid, the 3 layers at the top, is your product. And that consists of your value proposition, which is how is your product better or different than other alternatives. Your feature set, which is the functionality that brings the customer benefits to life, and the user experience, which brings that functionality into the hands of the users so they can actually use it. And then product market fit is just how well the top part of your product fits with the market, which is the bottom 2 layers. Once I had this robust model, then I basically created a process. And as I said, it's hierarchical. So in the process, you start with identifying your hypotheses about your target customer, moving on to needs, moving on to value prop, and so on. And then when you get to the end and you actually have a user experience, at that point, you can test that user experience with customers. And so that's the final step. And it's an iterative process, basically. And through each step of the process, we're going through this loop, and it's a modified version of build, measure, learn that I call hypothesize, where you form your hypotheses. Design, you design the best way to test your hypotheses. Test, you go out and actually test them. Learn, you actually capture the learnings, and then revise your hypotheses, and the loop repeats itself. So that's what we're doing throughout this process. So let me go through the Lean product process. As I said, step 1 is determining your target customer. This can be I know this can be kind of daunting as a first step. You may be like, I don't know who my target customer is, and that's okay. Those first 2 steps, target customer and needs, go hand in hand. So it's okay to have some tentative idea, move to step 2, revise, come up with ideas, go back and revise. So you just want those 2 to be in concert. But let me explain why it starts with target customer and why it's all about their detailed needs. And here I have an example basically of a high-level need that a lot of us have. Hey, I need transportation within 100 miles of my home to get to work, to get to school, to get to the store, whatever it is, right? So a lot of people have this need. But once we get into a specific target customer, say a soccer mom versus a speed demon guy, then they both share that high-level need. But when you get into the detailed needs, they're very different. The soccer mom may care more about having enough room to carry her kids and all their gear. She may care more about safety and fuel economy. On the other hand, Speed Demon may care just about going fast. He not care about any of the things the soccer mom cared about. He wants to look cool and he wants his car to make him look cool. And because of these detailed needs, even though they share the same high-level needs, you end up with very different products, right? for these customers. And so in the book, I talk about using personas. Personas are usually talked about in the area of UX design. I think they can be very helpful up front to get into those detailed needs and what really makes your target customer tick. Okay, the next step, like I said, is identifying their underserved needs. And a valuable framework that's very helpful to understand needs that I've found, discovered early in my career, is problem space versus solution space. And I'm excited to hear more and more people use these words in conversations about products. So let me explain. A problem space is basically a customer problem, a customer need or benefit that your product should address or that you want it to address. It's basically a product requirement or a well-written agile user story. In contrast, a solution space is a specific implementation to meet that need or product requirement, right? So problem space is absent of any specific solution. The second you do like a sketch or a wireframe or a mock-up or actually build a product, you've jumped into solution space. You've crossed into solution space. And there are plenty of examples of companies out there and teams out there that just jumped right into solution space and started building and coding or started designing without really thinking about who's the customer and what are the customer needs. Let me illustrate this with an example. Basically, when NASA was sending astronauts into space, they knew that the ballpoint pens that work here on Earth, because they rely on gravity, wouldn't work in space with zero gravity. And so one of NASA's contractors, not NASA themselves, but one of their contractors, Fisher, decided to proactively go out of their way and spend $1 million in R&D to design and develop a pen that would work in zero gravity. And they did. It's called a space pen. They're pretty cool if you've ever seen one. They work in zero gravity, and they're pretty cool. But faced with the same challenge, the Russian Space Agency gave their astronauts pencils. And you can actually get a Russian space pen. It's a joke. It's like a pencil in a box. And the idea here is just that, hey, if these two were relatively, roughly comparable solutions and met the problem, obviously the one that didn't take $1 million of R&D and all the time for R&D would be superior. And it's also an illustration that by saying, hey, by articulating things as we need a pen to write that writes in space, by having the word pen in your objective or your requirement, you've already kind of constrained the solution space solutions that you can do, right? And so the goal here is to take any solution space words out of your requirements or your objectives or your needs, customer needs, right? A better way to say it would be, we need a way to record notes in space, right? That would be more solution agnostic. Now, at the end of the day, I just always like to clarify, space pens are great. Pencils aren't that good, it turns out, because the lead can break off and get into things. The wood can burn. And so at the end of the day, Russians, use space pens too. So that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is to be clear about when you're talking about something, whether you're in problem space or solution space. Let me illustrate it with an example closer to home in software. Again, problem space will be on the left, solution space will be on the right. As Steven said, I used to work at Intuit on Quicken. Another one of our big products is TurboTax. It's a software product, so it's squarely in the solution space. It competes with TaxCut, another software product. And if we had to map back and say, okay, what overall, if we had to sum it up as to one problem, one user benefit that these products provide, what is it? And I think it would be something like prepare my taxes, or help me prepare my taxes. And when I was at Intuit, Scott Cook, the founder, also helped me kind of understand this problem space for solution space, because he used to always ask people, he'd always ask group of product managers, who's the biggest competitor for TurboTax? And everyone would raise their hand and yell out TaxCut. And he used to always like to clarify, no, it's actually pen and paper. Because at the time, more Americans were doing their taxes with pen and paper than any software solution. So the other advantage of being clear about problem space and solution space is lets you really understand your competitive landscape and what are the true alternatives for your products. Now, once you have a software product, it can obviously do more things than pen and paper, and we can articulate those. So the idea here is you want to get more and more detailed in the problem space, not just stay at the high level. Just like with a target customer, we didn't stay at the high level of just the transportation need. We peeled the onion and kept getting more and more detailed. So checking your taxes would be a distinct benefit that it could provide. Filing your taxes instead of having to go mail them. Maximizing your deductions by walking you through a wizard and asking you a bunch of questions. Reducing your audit risk by flagging certain things and saying, hey, you might want to look at this, right? And we could, as a team, build a robust problem space definition or set of hypotheses of all the benefits that we think our product could provide to somebody. And in other talks, I get into more detail how you might be able to organize that. In the book, certainly I get into more details, and I have more examples. Now, once you do that and say you have dozens of potential benefits that your product could provide, and by the way, I should say this applies for a new product if you're building a new V1 product, or also if you're adding features to an existing product or trying to improve a product or extend a product. The next thing that comes up is, great, out of those dozens of needs, which one should we actually spend our precious resources and time on? And so you need a way to prioritize those needs. And the best framework that I've seen for that is importance versus satisfaction, which I created into it, and some other people have also created similar frameworks, which I discuss in the book. So let me explain it real quick. Importance of user need is on the vertical axis from low to high. User satisfaction with current alternatives is on the horizontal axis from low to high. And, I'm an MBA, so I like to create 2x2s so we can talk about things, more easily. So let's break this into 4 quadrants and then talk about them, okay? The bottom one is basically low importance of user need, whether it's low or high satisfaction. At the end of the day, it's just not worth going after. The fundamental customer need you're addressing is low. So if you have all other things being equal, why not go after something that's higher importance? Okay, the upper right, now we have high importance of user need, which is good, but we also have high user satisfaction with current alternatives. When I think of this, I think of things like Google and search, hey, finding what you need on the internet. That's an important user need, but it's pretty well met by Google, right? And in the book, I talk about actually a startup that tried to take Google on several years ago called Cool, and they were basically going after an opportunity in this upper right quadrant. And when you're going head-to-head with someone like that, you basically need to be like 10x better, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. So where you want to be is this upper left quadrant. You've got high importance of user need, but low satisfaction with current alternatives. And in the book, I talk about how Uber is in this quadrant. And obviously Uber's done a lot of things right to achieve the growth and success that they have, execution, operations. But I think fundamentally, part of why they're so successful is that they went after an opportunity up here. If you just, you don't even have to talk to taxi riders, sorry. You could have hypotheses about, if you ask them, hey, how satisfied are you with your last 10 taxi cab rides as far as safety and cleanliness and politeness and ease of paying? You could easily imagine how those would be low satisfaction, high importance. And what the beauty of my framework is that you can actually visualize how much customer value is being created. What I'm trying to say is literally, if you plot a product that's meeting a certain user need as a point, the area that it basically creates in that framework is the amount of customer value that it creates. So if you have one product that's there and this other product that's green up and to the right, I'm basically trying to say that product creates that much more value than the other product, right? And so then what it can also do is let you assess the opportunity. The opportunity to create more value is just how much room is there to the right? If you're able to increase satisfaction to the highest level for the need that you're trying to meet. And so when you have an existing product, so yeah, that's the area, that's the opportunity. When you have an existing product, you're trying to just increase that customer satisfaction and move that point to the right to create more customer value. Now, if this seems kind of theoretical and abstract, I want to show you some real data from a product that I worked on where, I surveyed thousands of customers on importance and satisfaction, and here's the data. And we did that for 13 key features in our product. So each of these data points that you see is a key feature in our product. The first thing as a product manager I saw is this point up here, 100% importance, 98% satisfaction. I was very excited about that. It means we were doing a good job, but it also means I didn't have to spend any engineering resources, precious resources of design or development to make that any better. Instead, I was looking for what's in the upper left quadrant where we can really create a lot of customer value. And there was this outlier here, 83% importance, 55% satisfaction. So I focused on that. If this idea of getting quantitative about importance and satisfaction resonates with you and excites you, I highly recommend reading the book What Customers Want by Anthony Olwick. He's another expert that I said, after I came up with this framework, I was excited to see that he'd come up with a related framework. Another related framework is the Kano model. You hear about this more. I actually studied this. So I studied, before I came out to Silicon Valley, lean manufacturing, and I learned the Kano model as part of the quality movement from factories back in the day. And here he's got satisfaction on the vertical axis, going from completely dissatisfied at the bottom to completely satisfied at the top. How fully is the need met from not met at all on the left to fully met on the right? And the beauty of the Kano model is he breaks it down. All the features and benefits we're talking about fall into one of 3 camps, and I'll illustrate those. The first and most straightforward is performance, where more is better, right? Like I was talking about, if you're going to take on Google, you better be 10x better on some dimension, some benefit that somebody cares about. If we're talking about cars and you were shopping for a new car and you saw 2 cars that were very similar, but one had a higher miles per gallon than the other, you'd pick that one, right? Because fuel efficiency is a performance benefit. More is better. The second category of benefits or features is must-haves. And here, having a must-have doesn't make anybody happy, doesn't really create any positive satisfaction, but not having it makes people unhappy. And so an example here might be seatbelts. You might be looking at a car and say, this is a great car, and then look inside and realize it didn't have any seatbelts and go, you wouldn't buy it because you'd be afraid for your safety. But if car A had 5 seatbelts and car B had 100 seatbelts, you wouldn't say car B is 20 times better than car A. So that's a must-have. And then the final category is delighters. And here, the customer's not expecting it to be there, so not having it doesn't cause a problem. But having it could really create a lot of customer satisfaction, delight, and value. And so when I think about sticking with cars, years ago, the first cars that had GPS navigation in them, that was a delighter for people because it fundamentally changed how they got around. They didn't get lost. They didn't have to print out directions. But the interesting thing is over time, as we know, more and more cars have GPS navigation. And so things migrate over time, basically, right? So today's delighters become tomorrow's performance features and then eventually become must-haves over time. All right, so let's, and what we're going to do is use that Kano model to define our value proposition, which is basically, okay, of all the benefits we brainstorm, which ones are we actually going to deliver on in our product, and how is our product going to be better than the competition? And so I recommend using the Kano model in this way, where you list the benefits along the left, must-have, performance, delighters, the ones that are relevant for your product category. And I kept it generic here so you can envision it for your particular category. List the key competitors, competitor A, competitor B, and then list your product. And then basically score everybody on each of these dimensions, right? So let's go through this. So must-haves, of course, we all have the must-haves. It turns out the competitor A is the best at performance benefit 1. Turns out competitor B is the best at performance benefit 2, but we plan to be the best at performance benefit 3. We may have some insights into an underserved segment, or we may have some technological advantage why we can do better than these other guys in this benefit. Competitor A has a delighter, and we have our own idea for a delighter, right? So this really is the essence of product strategy, and I would say, honestly, like less than 5% of product teams ever do an exercise like this. And if you don't do an exercise like this, you end up risking building a Me Too product or a product that doesn't really matter to people. And in the book, I talk about a Steve Jobs quote where he says, for every yes when they're making product design decision, there's 1,000 no's. And so if you're not saying no, that's the other thing I see people, they'll say, hi, all down the thing. And it's like, if you're not making those tough choices, then you're not really being strategic. Okay. Then back to this idea of minimizing scope, we want to define what our value prop is, but we don't want to build the whole product. We don't want to have to build everything before we find out if we're right or not. So the whole point of MVP, minimal viable product, is how can we build the smallest thing to test our hypotheses, right? And I see the two mistakes I see people make with MVPs. One is they overbuild it. The scope's too big, which is the whole point of an MVP, and that's why that idea has become so popular. The second mistake I see people do with MVP, I'll explain with this diagram here. Let me walk through this real quick. This is from Aaron Walter's book, Designing for Emotion. It's a great framework, and a designer named Jussi Pasanen adapted it, and I adapted the work that those guys did. But basically, it's another hierarchical pyramid, a way to talk about a product where basically we say, a product delivers certain functional benefits. It needs to be functional. It needs to be reliable. It needs to work when you want it and how you expect it to work. It needs to be usable. You need to be able to figure out how to use it. And finally, it needs to be delightful, right? Usability is like, can people use it? Delight is, do people want to use it? And so we can assess a product on these 4 dimensions. It's a simple way to assess a product. The biggest mistake I see people do when they're working on an MVP is this, where of course they don't build the whole pyramid, because the whole point is we want to build an MVP, but they only build a subset of functionality, which is good because you don't want to build too much functionality, but they pretty much ignore or underserve the reliability, usability, and delight, right? And they use the excuse of, hey, it's an MVP, to have it be like a shoddy product. And, big surprise, when you test that kind of product, it's not going to test well, right? Because it's not usable, it's not reliable, it's not delightful. So you do only want to do a portion of the pyramid, but basically what you want to do is pick the portion of functionality, but make sure it's got adequate reliability, usability, and delight before you test it. Okay? And so you want to go through, think about the feature set you could build to deliver on your value prop benefits and come up with the smallest thing that you can test. And in other talks, I go into more detail. Certainly in the book, I go into more depth. Once we've gotten clear on that MVP feature set, now we actually need to create a prototype so we can test it in front of people. And now that brings up UX design, right? So far we've been talking about benefits, and then we finally transitioned to feature ideas and functionality. Now we need to translate that into user experience. And the metaphor I like to use for user experience design is an iceberg, because just like an iceberg, only a small portion is visible, but there's a lot more beneath the surface that you can't see. And what we all see, the part of the iceberg of UX design that we all see is visual design. We take in most of our information through our eyes, the colors, the fonts, the shapes, the images. That's what we take in. But when you use a product that just feels really intuitive and easy to use, it's because the product team has actually thought about these other distinct layers of the UX iceberg. Let's start with the bottom, conceptual design. This is basically what's the fundamental concept for the product design that we're going to deliver. I list a couple of examples, but the one in the book I mentioned is Quicken. So when Quicken came out, there were already 45 other personal finance software packages out there. And the founders of Quicken did some testing and realized, hey, none of these are easy to use. And they had a hypothesis that, hey, you know what, at the time, most people use checkbooks, and they're very comfortable using checkbooks. So they had a hypothesis, hey, if we make the conceptual design look and feel like a checkbook, then there'll be a much shallower learning curve, and people would just find it easy to use. They built their product that way, they tested it, and their hypothesis was right. So that's an example of conceptual design. Information architecture is how is your product organized and structured? Can people find things in a way? Are things where people expect them to be? Are things logically clustered? Interaction design is literally how your product and the customer interact with one another. So it's basically navigation, flows, any controls that they can click or tap on, that's interaction design. And again, to deliver a good product experience, a delightful product experience, you've got to think about all these levels. The other reason we need something to show people is that people aren't that great about having articulate discussions in the problem space. You know, they're not product managers, they're not designers, they can't prioritize their needs and talk about their needs. When you talk about needs with people, I didn't get into this, it's messy. People don't use the same words, people are at different levels of specificity, but what they are good at is reacting to a solution space. If someone's been using a software product for the last 3 years and I go and interview them, they can definitely tell me what they like and don't like and show me, right? And if I show them a prototype that's high enough fidelity and that they can see what's going on, they can react to it and give good feedback. So that's another reason why we need something tangible. Now, when we're creating a design deliverable or artifact to show to people, there's a range of options. The best way I like to classify them is by interactivity on the vertical axis and fidelity on the x-axis. Interactivity is how much can you click and tap it like the real thing. Fidelity is like when it comes to how it looks, how closely does it resemble the final product. In the bottom left, lowest interactivity, lowest fidelity, we have the awesome hand sketch, whether it's on paper or on a whiteboard. You can see the cover of my book is a whiteboard. I think whiteboard is probably like the top lean tool that exists because a team can quickly generate ideas and iterate, and it's not permanent at all. It invites quick iteration. The older workflow that people used to do is then they would go into static wireframes. So wireframes are lower fidelity than mock-ups, which we'll cover in a sec here. Basically, they're usually black and white or gray. You're not worried about colors. You're not worried about fonts or images. You're really working on layout and relative position and priority of things and navigation kind of. And there's a great tool I love, Balsamiq, that has kind of made it a lot easier for a lot of people to create these static wireframes. And then basically, you know, it used to be your UX designer would do the wireframes, and then they would work with a visual designer would take those and then add the colors and fonts and the look and feel and make it look pretty. That workflow is pretty much antiquated now, just to let you guys know. And nowadays, the new bar is basically clickable or tappable wireframes. And Balsamiq supports this. There are a lot of other great tools out there. Validately itself, if you have the assets, you can upload them and create prototypes using Validately as well. And then clickable mockups have replaced that. So before, you used to have just, you know, your visual designer would give you a zip file with a bunch of screens, you know, out of Photoshop. Now you can basically create clickable mockups, create clickable zones, and then link those together. So if they click on this button, it goes to this other mockup. And Envision is a great tool. I know Validately has really good Envision integration. I use Envision all the time. It's a great way, especially once you're at that point, you now have a clickable or tappable mockup that's high fidelity. If you test that with users, you can get a lot of great feedback. Next level up is interactive prototype. A lot of times you don't need this, but if your product has a lot of interaction, it might be worth taking the time to do an interactive prototype in some high-end prototyping tool or in, you know, HTML, JavaScript, basically. And then finally, there's your live product, which is the ultimate interactivity and fidelity, right? And just to illustrate the difference between a wireframe and a mock-up and low fidelity, high fidelity, here's the same app. On the left, you can see the Balsamiq wireframe. You can notice no colors, not worrying about font. You know, it's just kind of generic, but you can see the layout and structure and the elements. And then on the right, you now see the colors and the photos and specific graphic design, basically. And what a good workflow, just to be explicit about it, is for the team to start out with hand sketches, on a whiteboard and iterate together. When they're happy with the hand sketches, then and iterating here basically, and then when you're happy with them, having a UX designer create clickable wireframes for you basically, and then having the team discuss and iterate those, and then once they're happy, actually test them with users, right? That's where tools like Validately come in, are critical. Once you're happy with the wireframes, basically, then clickable mockups, and then testing those, again, with a similar tool like Validately. And then once you're happy with that, you should feel pretty confident that in building your live product that basically you've got something, if people responded well, clickable mockups, that you have something that your hypotheses are good, you've iterated your hypotheses, and that you've got something that, at least is on a good path to achieving product market fit. And again, recommend testing on your live product because things can change in the process. There may be differences once there's like live data and things like that. So I think this is a really good process to kind of break things down as opposed to be, for example, in contrast, just launching a product. This is a way to really reduce the risk and test your hypotheses without being too onerous, and you can do it quickly. Okay? And the last step is actually testing it. Now we've got our MVP, right? We've got our, whether it's our wireframes or our prototype, our mock-ups basically. We can go and do the test. And there's I go into a lot of detail in the book about this. There's fundamentally 3 different types of user tests you can do. There's in-person versus remote, like are you sitting next to the person or not? And there's moderated versus unmoderated. Are you proactively kind of asking questions and, kind of guiding them through the test, or is there no moderator at all and they're just doing it by themselves? So you've got in-person moderated, remote unmoderated. In-person moderated, you're sitting down next to the person. Remote moderated, you're using some screen sharing technology like we're using here. And remote unmoderated is basically like you have to record what they're doing and then you watch it later. The other thing is the type of customers. You can talk, if you're building a V1 product, you don't have any customers yet. So that's what we call prospective customers. If you do have a product, you can obviously talk to your current customers. And another category it's good to talk to is if you've had a product for a while and some people left you, you can test with past customers to kind of figure out why they left. And Validately is a great solution for all this. It records videos of the customer's screen plus the audio, which is what's critical. You can embed questions like survey questions in the user flow that people ask and answer. As far as talking to your current customers, they have a simple-to-use recruiting widget you can put on your website. So as people are organically coming through your site, you can say, hey, could you give us some feedback on our prototype, and pull them right into that. And then if you want prospective customers or you want to get fresh people that aren't your customers, they have a research panel with thousands of people, and you can specify your criteria. So they have all those options, basically. And again, back to the playbook, like people are like, yeah, I'm up for talking to users. I just don't know how to do it, Dan. What do I do? Like, how do I structure the session? So a good way to structure your session is to spend 10 to 15 minutes up front where you're just warming up and kind of doing discovery before. You don't just jump in and show them the prototype right away. One, you want to warm up to build a little rapport because you'll get better feedback that way. But you're really here also testing your hypotheses in the problem space about, okay, like what do you use today? Oh, I use Salesforce today. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What else have you tried? Why did you pick Salesforce? Whatever it is, and getting that information, that qualitative information to test your hypotheses. And you almost always learn great things here about something that you thought mattered that they don't think matters, or that you didn't even realize mattered to them, or some other competitive product that they've tried, or some hack that they've come up with that you won't even believe. Like, wow, you copy and paste and then you do this. I can't believe you do that. Then once you've gotten through that, then show them the prototype and spend 30 to 50 minutes depending on how much you've got to show. And what I like to do is be as non-directed as possible. This is not a usability test where the goal is like what percentage of people can complete the task. For a V1 product, we're really just trying to get like, is this even meeting the right needs? Does this seem like it's meeting the right needs for you and solving the right problems for you? Obviously, usability is important, but that's why it should be non-directed, because at the end of the day, when you're launching your product to the world, you're not going to be able to sit next to every customer and hold their hand while they're on their browser or on their phone looking at your product. So we want to keep it as prototypical to that experience as possible. It is okay to ask questions, to gain understanding. If someone goes, that was easy, and you say, can you tell me why you found that easy? Or someone goes, that's confusing, you could ask them. So the whole point is to not lead the witness, but to respond and react to what they're saying or doing and ask questions to gain that understanding. At the end, it's good to just have a little formal wrap-up at the end. I mentioned not breaking character. Like a lot of times someone will be like, okay, so what do you want me to do? I'll be like, just do whatever you would do if you're at home by yourself. And I'll be like, okay, do you want me to click on the register button? Just do what you would do if you were all by yourself. Okay, what should I do now? Just do what you would do if you're home by yourself. That's what I mean by not breaking character. It's like you're not there, basically, right? It's just them and the product. So if any questions did come up, that's the time to answer them at the wrap-up. It's like, oh, yeah, when you were going through that one page, you asked me about this. I couldn't answer it back then, but let me explain it to you now. If there are certain features they didn't get to. And then the other thing is ask them if they would use it. This is the difference between product market fit and usability. Someone may be able to do task completion, but then at the end of the day, they don't find value. And I found this firsthand in my startup. I practiced what I preach. I ran 80 one-on-one user tests before we launched at TechCrunch 50, where we won the People's Choice Award, and kind of worked out all the rough edges. So there were no usability issues. We fixed the messaging issues. And I started asking people, because the tests were going so well, hey, would you use it? And to my surprise, about 15% of people, even though the test went well and no issues came up, said I wouldn't use it. And that's because they didn't like to get their news that way. They had preferences for how they got their news, and they wanted to get their news a different way. So that's the difference between product market fit and usability. Some quick do's and don'ts. At the beginning, most people don't want to hurt your feelings, and they're not going to say bad things. And so you need to debunk that by saying, hey, look, we're here talking to you because the product isn't done yet, and we want to get your feedback. If you don't give us any feedback, the product's not going to get any better. So by telling us what you don't like and how it can be better, you're actually helping us. And please don't worry about hurting our feelings. The other thing is not everyone is verbose and talks out loud, so you need to tell them, hey, please share your thoughts with me. That's called the Think Aloud protocol as we go through this. Again, try to be a fly on the wall. The biggest variable that I see in good tests versus bad tests is non-leading, is the type of questions, how the questions are asked. There's two main dimensions. One is leading versus non-leading. If I go, hey, that was easy, wasn't it? That's a leading question. And then open-ended versus closed. If I say, did you like that feature? I've set you up to only say yes or no. But if instead I said, hey, what did you think about that feature? Now that's more of an open-ended question that invites some discussion. Definitely take notes and review them. Avoid leading and closed-ended questions. Resist the urge to help the user, if they can't figure out what's going on. You need to kind of feel that pain. Hopefully your developers and designers are attending too, so they can feel that user pain. At the end, you can address all that in the wrap-up. Definitely don't get defensive and don't blame the user. I've seen some teams go, man, can you believe that user couldn't get through our flow? It's obviously your fault if they can't figure it out. So what are we getting feedback on when we do this? In the problem space, it's basically all the hypotheses we have in our product market fit pyramid, right? Our prototype is the embodiment of all those hypotheses. In the solution space, I found that we're basically getting feedback in three distinct dimensions that you can tease apart. One is feature set. They may, you may say, hey, I think this feature is really important. People may agree or disagree, or they may see that there's a missing feature that they need. UX design is, can they use it? Can they figure it out? If you have the feature but they can't find it or they can't use it, you're not really going to create the customer value. And finally, an often overlooked part is messaging. And I have a whole separate talk about messaging market fit, but especially for V1 products, you may just be using words and descriptions that don't resonate with people that they don't understand. And the good news is that's relatively easy to fit. And so what we're doing basically, just to illustrate how we iterate across waves, I recommend talking to people in waves of 5 to 8 is, say based on all of our assumptions and hypotheses, we're heading in a certain direction, like a certain product vector. And we, based on those assumptions, we build a mock-up or we, have some product and we test it with people. So we make all these assumptions in the problem space, build a mock-up so we can show it in the solution space to people. And they say, well, I like this, I don't like this. And we go back and we revise our assumptions. And we change our direction. We revise our mock-ups. We go back and we get more feedback. They go, well, I like this, but I don't like this. And you go back and forth like that. So you're going back and forth between problem and solution space. And if we go back to my loop here, hypothesize, design, test, learn, we can superimpose problem space and solution space. Basically, when we have hypotheses, those are in the problem space. When we come up with the designs and test them, we're in the solution space. We need to take those learnings back to the problem space, revise our hypotheses, and go through that loop. I want to quickly cover a case study because I find everyone that I've spoken with finds it helpful to have a real-world study. So this is from marketingreport.com, a project I did for a client of mine. It was a really small team. The CEO had a product idea, an idea for a new product he wanted to test before he invested any development resources or any serious investment. It was me, the CEO, the VP of marketing, and UI designer. He wanted to see if there was a business opportunity, and he didn't want to write any code. And the product concept was a marketing report that let you control the direct mail or junk mail that you received. And there were a lot of analogies to a credit report. Just like a credit report kind of empowers you to figure out why you're getting approved or denied for credit, the marketing report would give you transparency into why am I getting certain mail. Like an example I would use is, say a cat litter, I received a coupon for cat litter in the mail. Well, that's because somewhere in some marketing database it thinks Dan Olsen has a cat. but I don't have a cat. So it'd be great if I could tell them I don't have a cat so I don't keep getting it. And it'd be even better if I could say, hey, I have a dog, so I actually wouldn't mind if you send me dog food coupons. And that actually, so, there was a lot of fuzziness around the idea. So first thing I did is say, let's clarify the problem space and the solution space ideas. And the core idea was find out what they know about you, this transparency, like a credit report, which led to features of a marketing report, which consisted of a marketing score, like a credit score, and a marketing profile, which is kind of like what segmentation or demographics do they have on you. And this was the core idea. Again, lots of parallels with credit reports and credit scores. And then there were other ideas. One executive was really excited about, okay, let's go down the dog food coupon route. Why not, instead of just giving you transparency, let you opt in for relevant money-saving offers, let you compare your spending habits and spending to others. And because social networking was hot at the time, social networking was thrown in too. So that was that kind of separate cluster of benefits related to saving money and spending and shopping. And then the other executive was interested in, well, what if we just help people reduce the junk mail? We give them transparency, but we also let them say, you know what, I don't have a cat. Stop sending me cat stuff. I don't care about getting dog food coupons. And we brainstorm a secondary benefit of Save Trees. So I iterated with the team on the whiteboard. I drew this up, and we finally got to the point where, I said, hey, are all your ideas represented in this framework? And they said, yes. I looked at this and I said, you know what? If we're going to do an MVP prototype, this is way too much for one product. This is actually like 2 different products. So let's split it up. So I came up with a marketing shield concept, which consisted of core benefits plus the junk mail benefits, and a separate saver concept, marketing saver concept, which consisted of the core, find out what they know about you, and the money saving and shopping. And we created basically medium fidelity, I would call it, artifacts to show. And here's an example of the marketingreport.com homepage. You can see it's got some colors and some styling, but we didn't go crazy worrying about being too high fidelity here. And then when you clicked in, you would have the page with these little modules. Each of those modules would correspond to one of those features that we had. And that's how we would use the same UI, kind of mix and match out the modules for the shield versus the saver, without having to do 2 completely different designs. And when you double clicked on one of the boxes, it would go into the detail page for that feature with all the benefits. So once we had our mock-ups, the next thing was we had to recruit people, right? And this is where a lot of people run into struggles. So like, how do I find people, Dan? And one of the important things is actually to make sure the people you talk to are in your target market. Because remember, the pyramid starts with target customers. So you may do all this stuff, have your prototype. If you talk to the wrong customers, they're going to give you the wrong feedback and send you iterating in the wrong direction. And so we wrote a basic screener, which is just a survey to using your hypotheses and intuition about what makes someone be in your target market or not. In the book, I go into a lot of details about different ways to segment customers. But here we just kind of asked a few questions about, okay, if they value saving money, they probably are already using coupons. They probably have a Costco membership. For the junk mail, they probably have a paper shredder. They probably block caller ID. So we asked what I call behavioral questions, and we asked about 5. And if they said yes to 3 or more, then they qualified for that segment. We paid each person $75 for their time. I usually like to talk to people one-on-one, but we scheduled groups of 2 or 3 because the CEO wanted to get feedback quickly, and that worked pretty well. And I basically moderated each group through the mock-ups and heard their feedback. So what did we learn? Here's the same chart color-coded now. Green means there was some appeal, some strong appeal. Yellow means there was like lukewarm appeal, and red means there was low appeal from customers. And so the interesting thing, the first thing is that the core idea, find out what they know about you, there was no green in there, and the marketing score was red. It was confusing. People understand it. The second thing you notice is, hey, we got some green, and that's good. There's no guarantee you're going to get some green, right? And just to be clear, this wasn't like a slam dunk. It wasn't like people were ready to sign up for the junk mail service or the money saving offer service. It was just, hey, we can see that there's some issues and questions here, but we think there's enough potential here to move on. People didn't go for social networking. And the cool thing, not only was I excited that we found green, but I was excited that we found the marketing score was red, because that would have been a very expensive feature. We would have had to buy data, get a data feed from some third party. We would have come up with a proprietary algorithm, right? It would have been a lot of engineering effort. So I was excited that we could cut that fat off. But now we were left with a decision. This is what pivoting is all about. Are we going to pivot to the left to junk mail? Or are we going to pivot to the right to money-saving offers, right? And we decided to pivot to junk mail because there was stronger potential there, better fit with the brand, and less in the money-saving offers. That would have required a lot of biz dev deals, and there were already a lot of competitors, so differentiation would have been tough. And so then we completely pivoted away from marketingreport.com to junkmailfreeze.com. So here's the new landing page. And you can see it's completely different. It focuses on the benefits. We learned so many details. This is what I mean by peeling the onion. When you go out and talk to people, we learned specifically that there are certain types of junk mails people really, really hate, like cash advance checks and new credit card offers. So we put that right up front and center so that they knew that our product did that, right? Interesting things like, hey, people want to know, well, how you're going to save trees? How many trees? So we put in, save 43 trees. You can see there, right? So we just got, I had like 8 pages of notes of what we learned, and we made sure our new prototype addressed all that. And it was the coolest thing I saw, basically. At the end of this, in this test, basically people, when we tested again with our new prototypes, people were just kind of silently nodding through much of the test, kind of nodding along. You know, they had a few questions here and there. We got some additional detailed ideas about how they want to control the junk mail that we didn't have from the first test. But in general, they were really positive. And we actually asked, hey, would you pay $10 a month for this? The first time around, no one was willing to pay. This time, everyone was willing to pay. It's always a little iffy to ask people if they would pay. It's much better to see if they actually bust out their credit card or PayPal account and pay you. But we could tell there was a marked difference in the overall appeal. And then the other thing was, at the end of it, I would give people their $75 check and thank them for their time. Almost every person said, so can I sign up for this now? And I was like, well, it's not quite out yet. You know, hey, can I give you my phone number? Can you call me when it's out? Which was fundamentally very different behavior. We didn't see anybody doing that the first time around. So to sum it up, basically, it took us 4 weeks. We did it relatively quickly. Again, 0 coding, reasonable cost, 1 round of iteration. I believe we found a compelling concept that people were willing to pay $10 a month for. Now, they did say, hey, you know, I'd have to have a free trial, but if it worked, I would gladly pay you. You know, they weren't ready to just pay $10 on faith, but they said, hey, if it really works, if it does what you says it does, I will gladly pay you. Again, just as important, we trimmed away the fat, trimmed away the non-value-added pieces. You know, that would have been a lot of money and time if we hadn't done that testing. And at the end of the day, we didn't do anything that was crazy or magical. You can achieve similar results. I walked through in the book, you know, exactly how to walk through these steps yourself. So to sum it up, the lean product process: start with your target customer, figure out what their underserved customer needs are, figure out your value prop, how your product's going to be better or different, figure out what your MVP feature set's going to be, create a prototype, test it with customers, and then iterate using that hypothesize, design, test, learn loop, and improve your product market fit. The book, like I said, it goes into detail on all the stuff. It's got 3 parts in the book. Part 1 is all about the stuff that we covered today. It also, I wanted it to be a comprehensive product guide, so it also has a chapter dedicated to UX design. You know, I quickly covered the pyramid, you know, in a few minutes. I have a whole chapter that goes in depth on it. Obviously, once you're ready to build your product, that's where development comes in. So there's a whole chapter on agile development that covers Scrum and Kanban. And then once you've launched your product, then, you know, what I've talked about here today is very qualitative. Once you've launched your product and you have users, you can use analytics as well. So there's 2 chapters on analytics. It's available from Wiley on hardcover and ebook, and it's available on Amazon. And I was psyched that when it launched, basically it did pretty well. It was a bestseller in starting the business. It ranked up pretty high. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. You'll find it a much more in-depth treatment of what we talked about today. And with that, I'd be happy to open up to questions. There's my Twitter handle. Again, if you want to tweet to try to win a copy, that'd be great. My SlideShare link is there. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Dan. That was fabulous. I got a preview of this in August at a meetup we had in New York, but I think there are a lot of great nuggets that are super practical that we can all kind of bring to our work on a daily basis and share with our team. So thank you. If people have questions, if you just want to put it into the chat, that would be great.
Oh, that's a job. I see. Okay.
No questions, guys?
You have to click on the chat bubble. It took me, I couldn't find the chat window right away. So if you do want, there's a little orange chat bubble at the top. I don't know. The UX design part of the iceberg may be getting in the way.
I guess what are some of the, you know, as we wait for people to figure out
When ordering ebooks, what happens if my tablet crashes? How can I get a copy of it? Well, I think like if you do Kindle, then they know that you bought the book on your Kindle, and so you can certainly re-download it. That's not a problem. And you can, if you have a Kindle, I use a Kindle. I use Kindle on my phone. Actually, I have a Kindle. I don't use it, but you can read it on your phone, your computer. So, an Amazon ebook, a Kindle ebook, you wouldn't have any problems if your tablet crashes. Preference for informal or lab-based? Thanks for asking that. Usually I kind of went fast. I like to preface the usability and the user testing and the ramen. The whole reason I use ramen is when I was at Intuit, so Intuit was a pioneer in usability testing, right? And then when I was there, I had the luxury of using their $1 million lab. It's all white. The user comes in. There's a one-way mirror. You're sitting in the other room so you can see them, but they can't see you. There's cameras on their face. There's cameras on the screen. And that's great, right? But then I started working at startups and consulting at startups, and I realized, you don't really need that. You just need a table, a chair for you and the customer. And then ideally, the one thing I think is good is for them to use their own device, whether it's a laptop or a tablet or a phone, so that I've seen this happen. Someone is used to using a Mac their whole life, and then you give them a computer to test the product on. You're using a Windows browser, and they kind of get lost or tripped up sometimes, and that gets in the way of the test. So having them use your own equipment is good, but I think informal is great. I don't think you need the lab. I mean, you don't want any distractions or noise around, and so sometimes you don't want too many people in the room. I think 3 max is good. If 3 observers max, 2 is better. 1 is great. Maybe 1 and a note taker. But one thing people do is like set up a webcam over to an observation room, and then you can have as many people as you want. Hopefully that's where your devs and designers are sitting. When you rank importance for satisfaction, how specifically did you structure those questions? That's a great question. And so in the book, I actually give verbatim the questions to ask. And that was one of the beauties of working at Intuit, actually. We just had a little reunion, and I saw the market researcher that I work with. She had a PhD in market research, and I learned so much from her. So I thanked her a lot. After I had left Intuit, I realized that there's a lot that goes into survey design. If the average person writes a survey, it's probably not going to be that great of an instrument. But there are things on survey scales like what we call like bipolar scales, like you saw going from very dissatisfied to very satisfied, where you've got positive and negative values. That would be a bipolar scale. So for satisfaction, I would use a bipolar scale so that people can weigh in on that, basically both ways. And usually for that, it's a 7-point. There's also a lot of research, a 7-point scale with 7 values, right? So going from very dissatisfied all the way up to a neutral. You have a neutral option in the middle, so 3 negative options and 3 increasingly positive options. For importance, there's no real negative importance, so you just want to go from nothing to like 0 to 100%, basically. And so a 5-point scale is good for that. So and you can basically, once you have the data on the 5-point scale for importance and the 7-point scale for satisfaction, you can translate that into 0 to 10 or 0 to 100, as I did in that graph. As far as the questions go, it's literally like, how important is it to you that, and then you say what the need or benefit is, right, in customer speak. And then satisfied, you say, how satisfied are you with your current solution for, and then you list the need, basically. And so you can use that 7-point bipolar scale for satisfaction and then 5-point unipolar scale for importance. If you have an existing application you're looking for feedback for improvement, have you seen posting question feedback after logging useful? This gets at the modality. I didn't share a grid in the book. I have a grid of all that kind of helps categorize different research methodologies, right? And there's basically, and I didn't get into it now, but what I covered today is very qualitative, right? It was about talking to people, and versus say a bunch of A/B testing and numbers and statistics, which is more quantitative. And I call that Oprah versus Spock. Oprah, does qualitative interviews with people. Spock goes off the data. And so and then the other dimension is attitudinal versus behavioral. Like behavioral means what people actually do and watching them. Attitudinal is what they tell you. And if you're asking them about their behavior, then it's what they say they would do. Like I was asking about if they would pay $10. So when you post when you post questions, you can do it. You'll probably have a low response rate. After logging in is not the best time because someone's logging in to go do something and you're kind of interrupting them. I'm sure we've all seen those 4C surveys that come up or other surveys. And I don't know. So logging out actually is a better place because it's the end of a flow. They've finished whatever tasks they're doing. Now people don't always log out, but finding ways that are organically. So one is when do you ask? The second is the methodology. And, the advantage of what you propose is you don't need a person to do it, so it scales really well. The disadvantage is you can't ask why, or you can't ask a follow-up question. So I think a mix of remote question and remote research like that and in-person, complementing the two, can be good. And then there are tools certainly that, like, over time, I think like User Voice and other places where once you've got a set of issues or problems, then people can vote on them. That's a lot easier for people to do. So you get higher engagement on that because there's less effort required versus, you know, someone having to type out a couple of sentences about what they like or don't like. And Viewer 31 says ready to read the book. That's great. Will your slides be on SlideShare? Yes, I will post them on SlideShare. There are some previous talks that have similar slides, but I'll post this one up there too. And again, that link is right there at slideshare.net/Dan_O. And you can see other talks I've given. So like I said, this is the Oprah talk. I have a Lean Product Analytics talk that goes into, okay, once you've launched your product, how do you apply quantitative techniques? And I have a separate talk on messaging market fit that really gets into messaging. So those might be some other talks you might be interested in checking out on SlideShare.
And we've recorded the webinar, and we'll be sharing it via email with all of you tomorrow, along with a special offer for Validately. So if you want to put into practice some of what you learned about today, our platform can help you do that. Just one thing I wanted to add, Dan had touched upon a bunch of our unmoderated product capabilities. We also have a solution that makes hosting and recording moderated sessions very easy, and we also do custom recruiting of test participants because, as Dan mentioned, it's so critical that you are testing on people who actually are in your target market, and so we help you find those people and do it on a custom basis and work with whatever your screener or profile is.
And I think that's great because it may sound silly, and in the book, because I know I've given workshops and talks and I work with clients, so I get questions like, how much did you pay people, and how do I find these people, and one person read my book and was like, why are you getting those mundane details? I'm like, well, that's because people, when they try to do research, they're not research experts. They have those questions. So finding the people, like, if you're just like targeting college kids and you have a college nearby, that's great, right? You may be able to go over there and crash at the student union. But if you're targeting, marketing executives or, doctors or something else, like finding them can be a challenge, or finding them in an efficient way can be a challenge. And so that's where a tool like Validately, where they have a panel of customers and they can do the customer recruiting for you, can really be beneficial so that you make sure you're talking to the right people, and getting that valuable feedback.
Well, it looks like we're just at 2 o'clock, which is when this is scheduled to end, and it doesn't look like there are any other questions. But again, we'll share the presentation, and you can also look at this presentation as well as Dan's others on his SlideShare link. And thank you, Dan. This is fabulous. I'm so glad you could join us. And stay tuned for some other upcoming webinars, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.